to another episode of Two Old Men in Chairs. I'm Corrin Strong.
I'm Howard Appel.
And on your screen, you see a very iconic photograph. It was the album cover of the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, which came out in 1963.
Yes, with his girlfriend, Susie Rotella.
Right. And that image has been recreated many times. It was in a movie, too. I forget. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Where they put that image into it?
It sort of epitomizes the bohemian lifestyle of the 60s.
It's early 60s. It's New York City. There's a Volkswagen bus there, which must have been one of the first ever Volkswagen buses, or near to it. And anyway, so this album was, do you know what, second or third album, fourth album?
This was only his second album.
Second album?
Yes.
Okay.
His first album was 62, this was 63.
Yeah, and it has some great songs on it. I can't quite read all the songs. I don't know if you remember any of the ones, but this is an album that Howard and I grew up with, going on 60 years old.
Yeah, and later we found out there was 4 or 5 other great songs on it that there just wasn't, he was so prolific at the time, there just wasn't room for these other songs.
They later came out on bootlegs, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is when his creativity really exploded. But it was during a period when he was still considered a protest singer.
Well, that's really where he garnered it. He'd only been writing original songs for maybe a year and a half or a year when this came out. So this is where he created that image.
And one of the songs on this album, which we're going to review today, is called Masters of War. And I heard that it's been rated as the #1 protest song of all time. And it's really sad, I guess, that 60 years later, it's still extremely relevant. This is the audio version off the album. It doesn't have a video, but it does have the lyrics on it. So we'll go ahead and start it up. And anything else you want to say before we go?
One reason this is maybe the most is greatest protest song is we've been watching a lot of songs with a lot of vitriol by these young kids dropping F-bombs and really tearing at people, but nobody has as much vitriol in this song as...
The level of vitriol in this song is unequaled, but at the same time, he's talking about some very bad people, and so I think it's justified in my mind, but we can debate that.
Come, you masters of war, you that build the big guns, you that build the death planes, you that build all the bombs, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind discs. I just don't want you to know I can see through your masks. You that never done nothing but build to destroy. You play with my world like it's your little toy. You put a gun in my hand and you hide from my eyes, and you turn and run farther when the fast bullets fly.
So we're getting a little bit of a feel for it. And just to put it in context, this was 63. It was before really the Vietnam War blew up.
Man, there's a lot of people that were alive in the population of America, and a lot of people that saw both World War I and World War II in their lifetimes. They were still alive, and people were
So this is less than 20 years after the end of the Second World War.
And people had seen the 2 worst wars in the history of mankind.
Yeah. And of course, what he's talking about is what President Eisenhower made famous in his farewell speech, the military-industrial complex, the people who profit from the business of war by making all the weaponry. Those same people are still around, and despite Ike's warning, we still haven't figured out, how to stop them from making more and more sophisticated armaments that and then testing them in these little proxy wars like we got going in Ukraine right now.
But let's say something important right now. But since 1945, it's been a totally different game because of what you said. Since 1945, we've had the potential of always upgrading into atomic war, and there's only been the 2 bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the whole game of war isn't just the immediate game of war. It's the possibility of bringing an end to mankind on this planet, or at least our civilization.
Well, I think what they've tried to do is develop these very sophisticated weapons, that can kind of pinpoint, like the drones and the cruise missiles. In general, they try to downplay civilian casualties. They even try to downplay infrastructure damage and just wipe out, this general here or that
In general,
factory there.
If we can have machines fighting machines, that's probably better than having human bodies fight human bodies. And to some extent, I think that's happened. But it's still, the ugliest thing that people have ever invented, and there's no way around that.
Yeah, but it's as old as goes back before Judas.
And you turn and run farther when the fast bullets fly, like Judas of old. You lie and deceive, a world war can be won. You want me to believe, but I see through your eyes, and I see through your brain, like I see through the water that runs down my drain.
Wow.
You fasten all the triggers for the others to fire, and then you sit back and watch when the death count gets higher. You hide in your mansion while the young people's blood flows out of their bodies and is buried in the mud.
Well, I guess you can't really come up with a more realistic image than the young people's blood flowing into the mud. Just how awful war can be.
He's thrown the worst fear that can ever be hurled, fear to bring children into the world, for threatening my baby, unborn and unnamed. You ain't worth the blood that runs in your veins.
Whew. And so that's kind of a theme, take a step away from actual war like in Ukraine and talk about the psychological war that we've been under and the fears that have been hurled there.
Yeah, a lot of relevant lines, like afraid, that's common today, not just because of war, but a whole variety of things.
Yeah, we are really in World War III, not because of Ukraine, but because of the psychological warfare that's been waged against people all around the world in the last couple of years. When I listen to this song, 60 years ago, but same thing. Fear that makes you not even want to bring children into the world, it's still a problem. They're still doing that.
Yeah, he did another song at the same period of time, which was maybe relevant, called "Let Me Die in My Footsteps." Actually, very relevant because it was when the fear of a world war was keeping people inside in fallout shelters. Now we have the pandemic keeping people inside, but the theme of the song was, "No, I'm going to go out and live in the sun. I don't give a damn."
Yeah, and that's the way I felt about the pandemic. I wasn't going to die hiding inside. I was going to go out, take my chances, get exercise, get the sunshine, breathe the fresh air. But so many people did go inside and die in their beds. But then he says, "You people that are doing this, you ain't worth the blood that runs in your veins." That's a pretty good.
This is part of the vitriol. It's just
That's a pretty good curse.
when Dylan wants to take somebody, he really can do it.
Yeah, and this is about the same era when he did Positively 4th Street.
No, it would be a few years away. Well, it's 4.
Because
Yeah.
that may be the most
Well,
vitriolic song
I don't know. He doesn't want to kill him though.
towards one person.
Yeah.
Ever. If you're not familiar with Positively 4th Street, check it out. Here he's attacking a class of, he hates them, and he can see through them like the water going down his drain.
How much do I know? But you talk out of turn. You might say that I'm young. You might say I'm unlearned. But there's a one thing I know. I'm younger than you. That even Jesus would never forgive what you do.
And that's about the ultimate insult.
Pretty heavy stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Jesus
You are
forgives
so
everybody.
bad
Jesus forgives everybody.
that even Jesus would never forgive you. You can't get any lower than that.
Yeah, I haven't listened to this in a while. I forgot. There's more than just the stand on the grave line. There's a lot of nasty lines in here.
Yeah, but let's talk also about the format, the instrumentation, and then even he's got kind of a little bit of Woody Guthrie going here, right?
Just him on guitar, 3/4 time strum, simple chords.
But he says, "You can say I'm unlearned," okay, which is kind of it's a funny line because he's anything but unlearned.
Even the word unlearn makes him sound kind of unlearned.
But it makes him sound like he is unlearned to use that terminology.
It's very Woody Guthrie-esque.
It's a Woody Guthrie type, which he was a huge Woody Guthrie fan and
He was visiting Woody Guthrie.
Went to visit Woody when Woody
in New Jersey.
was in the home.
He was in a mental hospital, yeah.
Woody Guthrie disease, I guess they call it.
That he was misdiagnosed and put in the mental with mental patients.
And so he's so early in his career that he still has kind of those Woodyisms where he's trying to sound, like an Okie or something.
Yeah. I mean, this is really at the very beginning of his career. Remember, his first album only had 2 original songs on it.
Right.
So we've really got our first full taste of Dylan originality with this record right here.
Yeah, and he set the mark high with this.
Let me ask you one question. Is your money that good? Will it buy you forgiveness? Do you think that it could? I think you will find when your death takes its toll, all the money you made will never buy back your soul.
And it kind of maybe dovetails back to the song we just did, Tom MacDonald's new song about the 1% owning everything. And what does it profit you? I think Jesus said, what does it profit you if you own the whole world? And please, I'm going to paraphrase here, but you don't make it into heaven. In fact, I think he said that a rich man had less chance of getting to heaven than a camel going through the eye of a needle, if I have my scripture right.
It's amazing that this guy, 60-some years later, is still churning out stuff like this still.
Yeah, he's still producing. He's 80 years old now. He'll be 81, I think, this spring. Maybe this month, right?
Yeah, May.
So,
24th, I think.
he was a genius that just burst upon the world in the early 60s and just has had an astonishing output of over 60 years of work, which I don't think anybody will ever, maybe Tom MacDonald has a chance, he's young, but he didn't get started till a little later. But I don't know if anyone else will ever be able to meet this type of, total lifetime of work.
And it wasn't, there's some really nice love songs on here too. It isn't just this type of song.
Yeah. but this was in the protest era. And then, of course, a few years after this, he got in trouble because he left the protest world behind and he went more towards rock and roll.
Well, he would only do one more protest album, The Times They Are Changing. And then he started not just leaving the music behind, but the lyrics became more subjective and more personal, and the music became more popular and rock and electrified.
And of course, we don't have time to do the whole history, but a lot of people consider that he was Judas for turning his back on the protests in the folk music world.
We might do a video on that sometime.
We might have to do a video on that. Okay, let's see how this one does.
And I hope that you die, and your death will come soon. I follow your casket by the pale afternoon. I watch while you're lowered down to your deathbed, and I stand over your grave till I'm sure that you're dead.
But he's gonna follow to the graveyard and make sure that he's really dead. He's not coming back.
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't think in all of music or poetry anybody's ever expressed that much hatred, against an evil, what they could perceive as an evil.
Yeah, and in that he was so much ahead of his time. I mean, just that sheer emotion was something that, as young kids, I was 12 years old when this album came out. Of course, I didn't hear it for a few years later until he became more popular. But by the time I was 16 or 17, I had listened to this album probably hundreds of times.
The original Masters of War were, I just saw a documentary on this, a few weeks after Pearl Harbor. Franklin Roosevelt, the Congress had raised the taxes immensely, and they set us up for its massive national debt. And they wrote all these contracts out. They had like 100 and some contracts on the table. Roosevelt invited all the great industrialists to Washington, D.C., and in an afternoon he said, take what you want, fill them out, sign them, and 80% of these contracts were signed. And these were, the railroads of the time, the auto manufacturers, all the great industries, and the belief of the time was that the only way we could produce the quantity of armaments we needed was to do it under a capitalist system and let these people make profit. And that we certainly outshone any other totalitarian government with its production. And we outproduced
there's
Japan
no
and
question that, in order to face the threat of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan in a world war, that the United States became the arsenal of democracy.
Right. We were created by our own government to fight this war, and I don't think we've ever escaped from that. We never escaped from the national.
Well, that's the problem. Like when Eisenhower was giving his farewell address in 1960 or late 59, he's saying you got to beware of the growing influence of the military-industrial complex. It started to insinuate itself into our national life, and the real problem is, the amount of money that's involved with all these defense industries starts to, influence Congress people and people in government, and they're lobbied and they're bribed or however it's done. It's like you scratch my back, I scratch yours, and I think that's what Eisenhower was warning against: is the growing influence of the people that make those things, and how they can gain control through their money of the levers of power. I agree. You have to have a strong defense. You have to have the high-tech weaponry.
And who's going to build these weapons?
But do you have to have the proxy wars so you can keep testing and killing innocent people with all your weaponry?
I don't think the
Is
proxy
that part
war,
of the system?
I don't quite see the proxy wars as planned. I see the proxy wars as happening due to the human nature, and we're gonna, and we got our.
We just spent 20 years in Afghanistan, right? Fighting goat herders.
Yeah.
And
we spent 12 years in Vietnam fighting rice farmers.
Right, and what do we gain from that other than making a bunch of
But the damn
arms
thing
manufacturers
happens.
rich and perfecting all of our weaponry?
But they happen. Wars happen. Chicken and egg thing. The weapons are causing the war, or do people have weapons because war is likely? These guys are fulfilling a demand in a sense. And I just can't quite take them as the totally evil. You know, I see that as a leftist.
All right, well, forget about the arms manufacturer. To me, this song rings totally true about the people that are trying to control our world too.
Okay, that's a whole other situation.
But to me, I'm seeing that today, masters of psychological war,
Well,
and I hope they all die, and I will go down and piss on their graves.
Yeah. But now you're talking about something else, and I do tend to agree there, because these people basically want to enslave the world. That's their objective, and they don't care who gets hurt and who suffers.
I think those of us who grew up in the 50s, you know, we didn't experience the Second World War directly, but our parents did. And our parents lived in that Cold War mentality that, you know, we've got to be against the cops. And the Cold War mentality, you know, I think is best expressed probably in the movie Dr. Strangelove. And when the guy says, you know, that we should attack Russia first while we got the chance. And I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed, you know, 20, 30 million killed tops. That's the way they actually thought in the 60s. So
well, before the communist nations had the bomb to the extent we did, there was probably some validity in that logic.
If you want to be insane and destroy the world, yeah.
No, they wouldn't have shot back. We would have destroyed them. And
So you're saying it would have been a good idea if we'd knocked out all the Russians and killed them all in 1950?
I think if we we eliminated the Russian government and let MacArthur go in and take out North Korea and the Chinese government, yeah, I think it would have been a real good idea.
Boy, you are.
A real good idea.
It's funny because for most of the time that I've known you, Howard, you've been the liberal and I've been the conservative.
Well, let me say something about Ryan Rowney too, because I can remember the TV playing for the attack on Baghdad, and you rooting it on, and I said it was another goddamn occupying army, and you were rooting it on. So you flipped too.
Yeah, there was a lot of psychological warfare going on there. And don't get me started on 9/11.
Right.
But every time one of those cruise missiles goes off, the factory order comes in back in Texas or someplace. Hey, we need some more cruise missiles, guys.
Okay, but let's talk Ukraine now.
Put on another shift.
Okay, now Russia's attacked Ukraine. Okay, they did attack Ukraine. I have no problem stacking the deck in favor of Ukraine.
You know, give all the aid that you want, but don't brag about it publicly.
Well, that we agree on completely. These things
That's
should be
just stupid.
clandestine actions.
That's like adding insult to injury.
Yeah.
Not only did we sink your ship, but we're going to tell the whole world that we did it.
But this is a stupid, inexperienced, ignorant administration, and I think that's where it's coming from. Total stupidity and ignorance. And the Democrats seem to do that.
We have no disagreement with that statement.
Holding in the way, that's what I heard them say. They used to heed the words he said, but that was yesterday. Gold will turn to gray and youth will fade away. They'll never care about you, call you holding in the way.